A very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on a Thursday morning. It's one day before the summer transfer window officially opens, and we already have our first signing. Yeah, all the deals have been done. Probably by the time this video goes out on Thursday morning, you would have already seen the official announcement of Luis Guilherme being our first summer signing of the 24-25 pre-season. If it hasn't been announced, I dare say it will be announced at some time during the day, if not on Friday. What else is going to happen with the window now officially opening in a day's time? I think could be an awful lot more work to be done by Tim Steidten and Julen Lopetegui. Primarily Steidten. He's the one that's out there trying to find all these signings for Lopetegui to coach. Now, if you're new to the channel, please do hit the like button. Please do become a subscriber of the channel. Very easy to do. It doesn't cost you anything. All the content is free, and it doesn't cost you anything to become a subscriber. If you don't have a YouTube account, very easy to set one up. All you need is an email address, set up an account. You don't have to put any content on YouTube. Just use it to become a subscriber of this channel. And my apologies to people that have heard that several times over the last few weeks. Now, what am I going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to talk about, I've been encouraged to do a little bit more research, background research on Julen Lopetegui. And I'm glad in some ways that I did, because it has resulted in my asking many more questions that I didn't really know I had about the man and his future vision for West Ham United. I was encouraged by to look deeper into Lopetegui by a regular viewer. And my thanks to you, Freshfielder, for giving me the prompt. It didn't quite register with me what Lopetegui and the then Sporting Director of Football, Monchi, who is now at Aston Villa, did in their first summer transfer window when Lopetegui became head coach at Sevilla in 2019. And to be honest with you, I was actually really astonished at what they actually achieved in that first summer transfer window. Now, what they did was they oversaw or sanctioned 36 transfers. Yep, you heard me. 36 transfers in that one summer transfer window. 16 players came in, 20 players went out, and that doesn't include the players that are returned from loan spells to and from other clubs. Now, by anyone's standards, that's a revolution that more than an evolution. And if you recall, some time ago, when we heard that Lopetegui was going to become the new head coach of West Ham, I talked about he's going to oversee an evolution, because I was thinking more about the style of football. I didn't have it in my mind that he'd actually potentially look at creating a revolution when it comes to the squad. So in the summer of 2019, not only did Lopetegui and Monchi completely revamp the squad, but as head coach in that first season, Lopetegui and the team went on to be Europa League champions, and they finished fourth in La Liga. Now, in fact, Sevilla only finished fourth because of goal difference of 4 goals that Atletico Madrid had over Lopetegui's side. Otherwise, they would have finished third in La Liga. That's the first season that Lopetegui was in charge after having completely revamped the whole squad. Now, Lopetegui's team weren't necessarily the highest goal scorers in La Liga. In fact, they scored... there were several teams, about 4 teams, that scored more than Sevilla's 54 goals. But they did have a very excellent defensive record, just conceding 34 goals in 38 games. That was the 3rd best defensive record that season in La Liga. And the myth that Lopetegui does not trust youth could not be further from the truth. In the 16 players brought into the club during the summer of 2019, 9 of them were under the age of 25, with 7 over the age of 25. Julen Lopetegui meant business at Sevilla. He knew exactly what he wanted in the squad, so why waste time? He wanted the right squad from day one, rather than having to build it over several seasons. That's quite different to what we kept hearing from David Moyes about, tweaking the squad, changing the squad, keeping a base, etc. Lopetegui just tore up whatever there was at Sevilla and basically started again. Now, is that something that could be done in this summer transfer window at West Ham United? Now, over the past few weeks, I've been rather conservative in my estimation as to how many players we might buy and how many players might be moved on. Now, my caution has been blown right out of the window when I looked at the details of what Lopetegui did at Sevilla back in 2019. If Lopetegui does not think he's got the players in the squad that he's inherited from David Moyes to play the style of football that he wants, then we might well see wholesale changes happening at West Ham as well. Now, at Sevilla, Monchi would have agreed a plan with Lopetegui. And if you remember, in an early interview that Lopetegui did when he first became head coach of West Ham, he spoke about the importance of a sporting director's role and the head coach working closely together. Sporting director, technical director, the person in charge of transfers, i.e., in our case, Tim Steidten. It was, they had to agree, everyone from the board to the head coach to the staff to the technical director, sporting director, etc., had to agree on the direction that the club was to be heading and to work together to ensure that this happens. All types of transfers were made in that 2019 window. Basically, Monchi and Lopetegui were in tandem as to what they needed and what they wanted. And it sounds as if the same is going to happen with Tim Steidten and Lopetegui at West Ham. Like I said, all types of transfers were made in that summer 2019 window. Nothing was off the table. Money was spent at the high end of the spectrum, right down to free transfers. And both Monchi and Lopetegui were not afraid to also bring in loan signings to create the squad desired. Now, the most expensive signing that they oversaw was the then 20-year-old centre-back, Jules Koundé, who was bought for 35 million euros from French club Bordeaux, and the then 23-year-old right winger Ronnie Lopez from Monaco for a fee of 25 million euros. And apart from a few free signings like Nemanja Gudel, who at the time was a 27-year-old centre-back from Chinese club Guangzhou, the cheapest signing was 21-year-old defensive midfielder Jan Ateki, who came from La Liga 2 club Almeria. Now, I'm sure many of us have been evaluating the differences in how David Moyes set up the team at West Ham and to how we keep hearing about what Lopetegui is going to set up his team to do. And I've certainly been asking myself, how many of the current squad really do fit into Lopetegui's vision? Moyes, as we know, played a low block. Lopetegui plays a mid block. Moyes stuck to a rigid 4-2-3-1 defensive setup. Lopetegui, an attack-minded 4-3-3. Moyes virtually invited opposition we sat so deeply, invited opposition to attack, and when we managed to get the ball back, we rarely had an outlet to do anything with the ball when we won it back. Lopetegui's mid-block means that the team is quite compact, making it difficult for opposition to pass their way. Plus, Lopetegui allows players to drift a little further forward so that there is an attacking momentum when we do win the ball back. Moyes in midfield wanted disruptors, whereas Lopetegui wants a fluid, technically advanced midfield. The only similarity, I guess, between Moyes and Lopetegui is that they both want their fullbacks to move forward into more advanced areas to get the ball into the box. But the difference is what they did to compensate, where Moyes would normally send a player over, would have a player go over to the right or the left-hand side to sort of fill in when our fullbacks were moving forward. Whereas what Lopetegui does, he has a central holding midfielder who would kind of stay a little bit behind. And if the attacking play does break down, that midfielder would drop into a back three with the two centre backs. So there's a difference in the way he was approaching that. So when you put all this together, you start to ask questions of several current squad members. Can, for example, Vladimir Sufal be the marauding, forward thinking right back to deliver more balls into the attacking area? Look, he actually did all right last season. He actually got 7 assists. But can he keep that up? Is he capable of doing it in a more fast moving team that Lopetegui will design? Do, for example, Dinos Mavropanos and Kurt Zuma have the pace and technical ability to help with a mid block formation and carry the ball out from defence to set up attacks? Do Flynn Downs, Thomas Soucek, and James Ward-Prowse have the technical abilities in midfield that Lopetegui would demand? Does Mikel Antonio have the finesse to play a different technical game rather than Antonio using his body strength that David Moyes relied on so much? Or can Danny Ings, for example, play in that striker role with the ability to hold up play that Lopetegui had with the likes of Ed Naziri at Sevilla? All of a sudden, you can start seeing good reason why many more players could easily be moved on sooner rather than later, with Lopetegui and Tim Steidten looking to potentially build a completely different type of squad this summer. We have become quite acclimatized in a way under Moyes to think that the status quo with a few tweaks in the squad was the stable and right way to go. Look, actually, in fairness, Moyes did rebuild several squads in the time that he was there, but it always seemed to be round pegs in square holes. You'd buy a striker that didn't quite fit into the Moyes type of game. You'd buy a midfielder that he would then move out wide, or and stuff like that. He never seemed to quite get it right with regards to what he needed and what he was buying in the market. So if we don't have the type of players that Lopetegui is going to need, who could stay and who could leave? Well, let's start with the players who only have a year left on their current contracts, and there are several of them to evaluate whether they'll be part of Lopetegui's setup next season. And the first is Lucas Fabianski. He had his contract extended recently until June 2025, and at the age of 39, I doubt if we went to sell him, there are going to be many clubs looking to sign him at that age. Look, maybe, but maybe not in the Premier League. I don't know. We keep hearing that we're looking for goalies, and it does make me wonder now whether these goalie targets are more likely to come in as a backup to Alphonse Areola as a second choice rather than as a third choice behind Fabianski. Again, we become like, Fabianski's staying. Clearly, he's going to be the number two. I'm not so sure. And then we've got the likes of Kurt Zuma, our captain of last season. Zuma, final year of his contract as well. We can see the injuries have caught up with him. We have already been made aware that one priority area in the transfer window is to buy centre backs, two in fact, which may well suggest that the 29-year-old Zuma could be on his way out. Stories have already started to circulate this week that Lopetegui does indeed see Zuma as surplus to requirements, and that he might prefer a more agile, maybe younger, but certainly more technically gifted and certainly not as injury prone central defender to be brought into the club. Look, we all know that Aaron Creswell has been given a new deal, and that's been discussed. So we know that he's going to be part of the setup in some way next season. But we're also aware that Vladimir Sufal had his contract extended as well. The option of a year was triggered. So he's here until next summer too. But we know that Sufal is said to be unhappy with the contract deal that's been offered. Or in fact, no increase in salary, but to continue on the salary that he's currently on. Now, could he be a player that might be leaving this summer at 31? Again, Lopetegui might favour a younger and again, more technically gifted right back to take over from Sufal. Danny Ings is another player, another one in his final year of his contract, and apparently offers are being listened to. Look, with regards to Ings, it's possible that he could go back to Southampton now that they've been promoted, maybe on loan. But if we do that, we'll have to fund his wages, or certainly have to fund part of his wages in order to accommodate that. but it's quite possible that Southampton would like that kind of player at their club. The mystery still surrounds Mikel Antonio, another player that's meant to be in his final year of his contract. I did report some time ago that Antonio has had his option for a further year also triggered. But it's no secret that Antonio has been looking to move away from West Ham for quite some time to find a longer term deal because he knows that he's not going to get another deal beyond the season, beyond this season. So he's looking for something a bit more lucrative to the one that he currently has. Now, at 34, Antonio knows his playing days are somewhat limited. So it will come as no surprise if West Ham were to look at cashing in on him again this summer. And he could go to areas like the MLS, for example, or Saudi Arabia. Now, what about other players? Now, those are the players who are in the last year of their contracts, which some or all could be moved on. It's quite possible if we move all 5 of them on, we could get something like around £40 million in total on transfer money, with an extra potential of about £23 million saved in wages for the season. What about other players? Well, ironically, one player that I think could do well under Lopetegui is Naif Agurd. But it seems like Agurd, for whatever reason, we all thought it was because of the way David Moyes played his football, but the rumours are still going on that Agurd wants to move on. And there's interest from French clubs, Spanish clubs, and there's also Saudi money involved as well. At 27 years old, with 3 years left on his contract, we'd actually get some decent money for Agurd if he does move on. Thomas Souček, another player that's got 3 years left on his contract. And you've got to think about what Lopetegui wants. I've talked about the fact that he's going to look for technically gifted players. You can't say that Thomas Souček really fits that bill in more ways than one. 29 years of age, I dare say, if we were to sell him, we'd easily probably we get most of the money that we paid for him when he first joined West Ham. We ended up paying something like £19 million for him. At 25 years old, Flynn Downs, who's had a fantastic season at Southampton, they want him back. They want him back on a permanent basis, and it's possible that we could use the money that we sell for Downs to be spent in the squad for, again, someone more technically advanced. Look, I like Downs. I think Downs should maybe be given a chance, but there's a lot of fans that suggest that he's just not quite good enough. So you can see him going back to Southampton on a permanent basis as well. And another player that could go back to Southampton on a permanent basis, or maybe even a loan, is James Ward-Prowse. Again, we know one of Moyes' prize signings last summer. But many argue that that was just to appease Moyes so that we could get the likes of Alvarez and Kudus through the transfer door. It's very possible, again, just like Ings, just like Downs, that he could go back to Southampton now that they've been promoted. And there may be kind of like a loan with an obligation to buy. We may have to subsidise his salary somewhat in order to sweeten that deal. And then we've got the conundrum that's Maxwell Cornet. Maxwell Cornet, remains one of those players where you just feel if managed correctly, he could probably deliver. Now, Lopetegui may look at him during pre-season and he'll make that decision whether he wants to keep him at the club or not. But my gut says that quite possibly he will also be moved on in the summer too. There's other players. Said Benrahma could quite possibly go back on his way to Lyon. But I just wonder if Benrahma might get to stay at West Ham as the cover for left side of attack. Maybe he's more of a Lopetegui type player than he was as a Moyes type player. Look, these additional players, if they were all sold, can bring in another 90 odd million pounds, give or take, with further savings of something like 18 to 20 million pounds in salaries. So if you just think about all of this, with the potential income that we could have, around 130 million pounds of income for transfers, plus the 40 million pounds that we were meant to have in the transfer kitty that wasn't spent in January, plus the 15 million raised by selling Fornals and Kehrer, there could be quite possibly a transfer kitty of up to around 185 million pounds. But the downside of that is pretty obvious. We barely got a squad to talk of, if you can see from this chart. If we and I had to take my mate Paul Williams. I called it the squadometer. He's called it the squad emitter. And in this case, he's absolutely right. Because if we did sell all those players, if all those players did leave or sell, go out on loan or whatever, look what we've got. We've got a threadbare squad left. We've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 10 players there. So in order for Lopetegui to have a full 25-man squad, we need to go out and buy 15 players with 185 million pounds. Now, I dare say 1 or 2 players might well come through the academy to help compensate for those 15 that we need. But that means we're still going to need 12, maybe 13 players to be brought into the club. I guess with loans and 1 or 2 freebies plus purchases, yeah, it could possibly be done. But how much of a disruption will that cause to West Ham United? Well, you've only got to look at what Lopetegui did in his first season at Sevilla to give you a possible answer.